Evening settles over a small village, where cobbled streets shine beneath warm lamplight. A tiny wooden workshop sits between two low houses. The air inside smells of pine shavings and beeswax. Lanterns in the windows glow like patient little moons. Geppetto works at his bench. When the day ends, he sighs and whispers a wish into the quiet air. He says he wishes for a child to share his stories and his work. His hands remember wood grain. His voice hums at night.
One night, Geppetto carved a small puppet from walnut and maple. He worked by lamplight. He painted bright cerulean eyes and rubbed a smile until it seemed to glow. He carved hair with short, soft strokes, as if the wood had fallen asleep. When he set the figure on the bench, he felt a father's pride. He named the puppet Pinocchio and spoke to it like a parent. He tied a tiny scarf and set small shoes on its feet. He did this with the care he gave to his stories. Outline first, cut away what is not needed, and leave room for imagination to come in always.
A breeze slipped into the workshop, carrying tiny sparks of light. From them, the blue fairy appeared in a gown like dawn caught in a puddle. She moved across the room with soft steps and touched Pinocchio's forehead with a thin wand that glowed. She spoke in a gentle, slow voice and wished that he could walk and talk and learn to be brave, honest, and kind. The puppet blinked, painted lashes fluttered. His joints creaked and then softened. His feet clicked on the floor when he hopped down. Geppetto, holding his cup midair, laughed like warm bread breaking. For a long moment the two of them simply stared, amazed at the small miracle between them. Morning arrived with the smell of ovens and a soft fog on the cobbles. A tiny cricket in a navy tailcoat hopped up on the workshop sill and announced himself as Jiminy Cricket. He straightened his small top hat and set a tiny pocket watch, riding his tiny waistcoat. He spoke with earnest eyes and declared he would be Pinocchio's guardian. He was tidy in his manners and large in his care. Pinocchio listened with wide, honest eyes, full of wonder about the world. Geppetto watched them both and felt the household fill out like a half-stitched quilt getting its last thread. The house felt whole in a new way. Pinocchio learned quickly and asked a string of small questions. He wanted to know why birds could fly and why the sun felt warm. He watched the world like it was a new book. Geppetto answered slowly, drawing pictures in the air with a paint-stained finger and telling him simple stories. Jiminy Cricket reminded Pinocchio that curiosity must be lived with truth as a guide. He tapped his pocket watch and offered clear words about right and wrong. The trio spent days in gentle routine of work, play, and stories. The workshop, the street, and the school became a map where Pinocchio marked each new thing he learned with bright, small steps. One morning, Pinocchio asked to walk to school. Geppetto smoothed his carved hair and tied a small scarf. Jiminy Cricket folded his tiny hands and spoke about truth. Truth is like a clear path, he said, and Pinocchio promised. The path curved past stalls and hedges when Mr. Fox stepped out in a midnight blue coat. He bowed low, spoke in soft, polite tones, and painted a picture of play and laughter instead of lessons. He asked why bother with school when the day could be full of bright freedom. His voice smelled of citrus and clean cloth. Pinocchio felt the pull toward that easy idea and stood still, heart tugged between promise and desire. At school, a teacher asked why Pinocchio was late. He felt panic, like a small storm in his chest. He said something silly and wild, that he had been helping a dragon with its teeth. The lie slipped out before he could think of Geppetto's face or Jiminy's steady voice. When he touched his nose, it felt warm and oddly different. He saw it stretch, a soft, telltale length that made him laugh to hide his fear. Jiminy Cricket's antenna drooped in quiet disappointment. Pinocchio swallowed, flushed, and told the truth about the fox and the stalls. The wood of him seemed to ease, and the small length went back. Days passed in a soft pattern of little discoveries until a rumor came to their lane.
People whispered that Geppetto had gone to the shore to look for something he had heard in the wind. The sky shifted, and the sea turned a whale gray. Pinocchio felt his chest pull tight, as if a string had been drawn inside. He could not sit and wait. "We must find him," he said suddenly, like a bird taking flight. Jiminy Cricket clicked his claws and agreed, reminding Pinocchio that they must be brave and clever. The village offered a patched boat, a coil of rope, and a lemon-scented lantern. They set to readying it at once.
The sea was patient and slow as they pushed off the shore. Pinocchio tied knots he had watched Geppetto make for years. He set the oar with hands that have learned the grain of wood. Jiminy Cricket stood at his shoulder like a small, steady captain, eyes wide on the horizon, ticking off observations. The sky moved from pewter to a watery evening silver. Pinocchio felt each stroke like a small promise toward finding Geppetto. The boat felt small and honest under them, the lantern at the prow sending a thin, warm star across the dark. Waves rose and fell, testing courage but not attacking, as the night measured their resolve.
Far out on the dark water, they found Geppetto on a broken plank, voice thin but steady, calling a name he had spoken for days. Pinocchio lashed a frayed rope around the plank and looped his old scarf the sailor way Geppetto had taught him. He braced his knees and dug his heels against the wood until he could pull Geppetto close. Geppetto held him like an answer to a long ache. When they reached shore, soft lights shimmered and the blue fairy returned. She placed a cool hand on Pinocchio's chest and spoke of bravery, truth, and love. Warmth spread through him, and he felt something like a pulse.
After the sea quiets, the blue fairy places her hand on Pinocchio's chest. Warmth spreads like sunlight through wood. His joints loosen, fingers soften. He feels a small, steady beating where a heart should be. Geppetto cries and laughs at once. They hold each other until the boat rocks slowly toward shore. Jiminy stands watch, proud and tiny, his top hat tipped in a salute. The lantern swings and paints the sand gold. Villagers wait with blankets and quiet smiles. The night smells of pine and salt. Pinocchio looks at Geppetto and knows the word home with his whole chest. Together they walk back through the dark, guided by the blue fairy's gentle light. They cross the cobbled streets and enter the warm light of the workshop. Geppetto lifts Pinocchio in as if lifting a promise. The little room fills with the smell of pine shavings and beeswax. Neighbors peek in and clap softly. Lanterns hang like patient moons. The blue fairy stands by the doorway and smiles, then steps back into a shimmer of air. She does not leave them, but stays nearby in a new kind of quiet. Jiminy perches on the workbench and nods as if saying, "Well done." Pinocchio touches the tools and feels not only wood, but care. Geppetto hums a tune while he makes tea, and the house settles into a peaceful, hopeful hush. Night deepens and they prepare for rest. Geppetto tucks a quilt around them with hands that know how to mend. Jiminy lifts his tiny violin and plays a soft tune. Each note slides like a friendly hand across the room. Pinocchio listens and feels his breath slow into something steady and warm. He closes his eyes and remembers the sea, the bench, the little lessons learned by mistake. Geppetto hums along, fingers touching Pinocchio's hair as if checking for storms. The blue fairy stands in the doorway like a pale promise. Outside, lanterns blink low. Inside, the family braids together. Sleep comes quiet and full, teaching the new heart to trust the hush. Morning comes soft and bright. Sun slips through the window and paints the floor in gold. Pinocchio wakes to find his fingers warm and sure. He blinks, and his new pulse is a surprising comfort. Geppetto smiles until his eyes crinkle like folded paper. They share a simple breakfast of bread and honey. Pinocchio pours tea with careful hands, not perfect, but steady. Jiminy watches and offers a proud chirp. They plan the day together, small chores, a walk to buy more paint, and a visit to the school to say thanks. Pinocchio feels the lightness of doing right. Each small task makes him braver. Geppetto's laugh fills the room. It sounds like welcome. Near a lane, Mr. Fox pauses beneath a lamppost and watches the little house glow. He remembers the thrill of easy praise and the warmth it brought. But tonight, the light looks different. It is steady and small, not loud. He thinks about charm used to tug others away. He thinks about a quiet kindness that might let him sleep without plans. The fox hides his face for a moment and rolls the silver cane between his paws. He breathes in the honeyed air and wonders if he could trade applause for a softer warmth. The thought is small, but real, like the first seed of a new habit. Days pass and the village settles into a new rhythm. Children greet Pinocchio with bright faces. At the school, he thanks the teacher for patience and promises to listen. Geppetto helps mend coats for neighbors, using the same hands that carved a toy. Jiminy joins lessons and reminds Pinocchio when he strays with a gentle tug. Even Mr. Fox shows up with small repairs to make, offering help rather than tricks. The baker shares honeyed rolls, and the watchmaker polishes clocks for a festival. The town learns that kindness returns kindness. The blue fairy watches from a distance, content in the quiet work of small miracles and smiles. At school, Pinocchio sits steady and listens as lessons unfold. He raises his hand and answers simply. When a question asks about honesty, he uses his own story, not to boast, but to help others learn. A classmate asks about a small lie, and Pinocchio tells how it felt heavy and how truth eased it. Jiminy nods from the front row, proud and a little stern. The teacher pats Pinocchio's shoulder. They practice reading and counting and mending small things in woodwork. Pinocchio learns patience with numbers and knots. Each small success builds a quieter confidence than applause ever gave him. He learns to think before his words find him. Geppetto teaches Pinocchio the old tricks of wood and grain. He shows how to hold a chisel and how to listen to the sigh in the board. Pinocchio watches with patient eyes, trying the cuts and learning where to stop. Geppetto speaks softly about making room for ideas and leaving space for surprise. Jiminy sits on the shelf and times his breaths like a metronome, offering gentle nudges. Sometimes Pinocchio makes a mistake, and they laugh together, and the laughter stitches them closer. They carve a small wooden bird and paint it with care. Each bird is a lesson and a gift. Geppetto's hands guide Pinocchio's and then let go, trusting what the boy will do next. Jiminy watches the two he loves and thinks about how small voices can steer big hearts. He remembers the night he first pledged to be a guardian. He worries sometimes, but his worries are patient and shaped into helpful reminders. He taps a tiny watch and counts moments of courage to keep for rainy hours. When Pinocchio falters, Jiminy speaks with a steady chirp and a gentle lesson, not with scold, but with truth. He practices patience like one practices a song. The cricket feels useful, loved, and needed. In quiet moments, he rests on a windowsill and watches the moon, glad for the chance to be both guide and friend. The day winds down into a gentle evening. The workshop glows soft and steady. Geppetto sets a small lamp and folds his hands on his knees. Pinocchio sits close and tells a small story about a wooden bird that learned to fly. Jiminy plays a quiet tune on his violin, and the notes fall like warm drops. Outside, the village hush deepens, and lanterns blink out one by one. Mr. Fox passes by and tips his hat, kinder than before. The blue fairy stands just beyond the window and smiles at the peaceful scene. They settle together, a family stitched by courage and care, ready to meet whatever tomorrow will teach them.